In this final lesson, I'm going to show you how to implement FMOD sound events in a Unity game using C#. In the first 7 lessons of this series, I went through all the basic steps in Unity, C#, and FMOD. You developed sound design and music for the game that you see here, and we did it all from the ground up. If you haven't done any of that work yet, you should really start there. There's a lot of basic foundational concepts that are important, and it's helpful to go through that bit by bit and learn each of those techniques and really be able to understand them. This video assumes that you've done all of that. You've created everything in FMOD, and you're ready to integrate that audio into a new Unity project. So as a quick review, let's just go through the things that you need to do to prep the Unity file for FMOD. The first thing you're going to do is integrate the FMOD and Unity package. That link is in the description below. You'll know that you've done that because you'll see that you have a couple different things here in Unity. There's an FMOD event tab, there's an FMOD menu listed up here, and when you choose Edit Settings right there, you can see that there's also a studio project path. This is the location on your computer where the FMOD project is saved. And that file and Unity will work close together using that path in order to make sure that your FMOD audio and your Unity game are always connected and looking for files in the same place every single time. The other thing that you need to do is to make sure that you include the FMOD Studio Listener. Now, generally, that's going to go on the main camera of your game. And there you can see is my main camera, and here is my FMOD Studio Listener. So again, that's a quick review of the basic setup. All that is discussed in Lesson 1. Review that as needed. But those things are done here, so we are absolutely ready to go. Now, I have a cheat sheet to share with all of you. And if you go to this URL, you'll be able to find this document, and I'll refer to it frequently throughout the lesson. Save this for future reference and copy and paste the code samples that you see into your files as you work. It should make the process fairly quick and smooth. Everything is linked to a description of how you use it and when or why you might use it, and I hope that that will be helpful for everyone who needs to get FMOD and Unity to work well together. But that's exactly what we're going to do in this lesson, is just kind of walk through this process and see how you use each of these different techniques to get audio integrated into your game. So let's just jump in. We're going to start with a crate sound. In this game, we drive down, and there's some things that we can smash into, but we can hit these crates, and rather than hit them and have them go flying, this game is set up to hit them and they disappear. There's all sorts of different ways that we could hook up the sounds, but just, for the sake of example and simplicity, we're going to do this as a one-shot sound. And if I scroll down and find, here's my play one-shot. The FMOD documentation describes these as fire and forget, which means that they're really memory efficient. So if there's something that you know needs to happen frequently, and it's going to be the same way every single time, a one-shot is a really good way to work. Now, same way every time doesn't mean that it's going to sound the same every single time. Here for our crate hit, there's randomization in this sound event, so that randomization will still come through, but it's the same way every time, meaning there's no game parameters attached to this. There's nothing that we're waiting to see. We don't need to evaluate anything from the game to put this in. We can just play it every single time and let the randomization do what we need it to do. So if we're going to do that, we need to put that sound into the code for our game. So scroll through and find, there we've got on trigger enter, things are hit, and here we can see line 63, when this player controller script, for reference, player controller is attached to the vehicle. You can see player controller right there. So that means that when this hits something labeled tag, then we can, when it hits a tag named crate, then we can have that sound play. Great. So this is where a cheat sheet comes in handy. As a play one shot, I'm just going to grab this code. I don't need the whole function that's there from this example because I already have some code in my game. So I'm just going to copy that, switch back here, and let me just go ahead and paste it right there. Now, right now, all the code in the cheat sheet just has these placeholders for the name, but you can see that it's looking for a sound event path. And these are really easy to get here in Unity. We just need to find the sound that we want. There's our crate hit. And you can see that in this FMOD event tab, we have a full path. Just click this button that will copy the full path, switch back here, and paste it in. We can see, whoa, after we did that, we get all sorts of all sorts of nasty looking red lines. That's because this needs to be a string. It wants to see that path appear in quotes. So we do that, save it, switch back to Unity. We can run this, smash into some crates, and we get sounds, and we get some randomization based on our event, and that's exactly what we'd expect. Fantastic. So that's one way that we can do this. But there is another way, and it's not necessarily a better best. It's just, different ways to do it. So let's take a look at that. Switch back to our script. I'm going to go ahead and just comment this out for now. Or actually, let me keep it in. I think that might make it easier. But what we're going to do is come up here to the top of our script where we declare all of our variables. And I'm going to create a public float. Oops, sorry, not a public float, a public string. And I'm going to call it one shot crate hit. So this, let me save it first, and I'll switch back over here to Unity. Now creates one shot crate hit as a field here in our player controller script. And what we can do is similar to what we just did before. Crate hit selected, full path, copy, and then I can paste that full path in right here. Then, in our C# script, if I come down here, rather than have the crate hit listed like that, I can just start to type, and our variable one shot crate hit pops up right there. And so now this script is just simply taking the string that's stored in this variable and applying it to the play one shot. We'll get the exact same result, but the workflow is a little bit different. The way I think of it is that if you knew that you were going to put in a lot of sound effects and you didn't want to have to jump back and forth from Unity to C# very often, you could just put them all right here in the Unity inspector and keep track of them. And for some situations, that might make things a whole lot easier. Again, not a better best, just two different ways to achieve the same result, and your mileage will definitely vary depending upon your project. All right, the next thing we're going to do is add some sounds for smashing into this guardrail thing. Now we can hit it, but we don't have any audio right now, so let's do something about that. This thing is right here. It's called the prop barrier. And Let's do this in a more conventional way. And by conventional, I mean just the way that I find I've integrated more sound effects, which is to play the FMOD event. This takes a little bit more code, but it gives you more options. Namely, you can modulate that sound event using a parameter. And if we look here in our code, you'll see that when we hit the guardrail, we can track the velocity of our vehicle, which means that we can have sound effects that sound different depending upon how hard the vehicle hits this guardrail, which is a pretty useful thing. But in order to do that, we have to have parameters in our sound effect that we created in FMOD, and we have to be able to assign those parameters here in Unity. The barrier hit sound is here. You can see that there's a parameter called impact. It goes from 0 to 10, so the hardest hit, and then we've got one about halfway, and then we've got a softer one, and there's a lot of variation in between. Doing some filtering, doing some different things with layers. That's covered in one of the earlier lessons. But you can see there's a range of 0 to 10 floating point numbers. And if we retrieve a velocity value, we'll allow that number, whatever it may be, when the vehicle hits the barrier, to determine what this sound effect sounds like. So let's start with our cheat sheet. When we set up a sound effect like this, the first thing we need to do is to declare an event instance, and that is going to go right at the top in the class definition where we put all of our variable declarations. So I'm going to go ahead and put this up here, and I'm going to call this one barrier hit. So we now have an event instance called barrier hit. Now that it's been declared, our next step is to actually create it. And you can see that I'm creating it, at least in the cheat sheet here in the start function. That's a fine place to put it. So let me copy that code, and we can just simply paste it into the start function. Currently empty, but not for long. The name for our instance is barrier hit. See, so I'll type that in. Thank you, autocomplete. And then you can see that we've got an event instance, or I'm sorry, it's looking for the path again. So get rid of that. I'm going to keep the quotation marks because we know that strings are what it's expecting. Barrier hit, full path. Click on the button to copy it, and then switch back over here and paste it right in. So now the instance that we declared up here in line 15 is now created, and it has a sound path assigned to it. So the last thing we need to do is to just play it. Tell it to start. So I can grab that and then find the code. Let's see, when we hit the guardrail, I call it a couple different things here, but there we go. And let's change that to barrier hit start. And let's test this out and see what we get. Code compiles, we load it and play it, and we smash it. Now, the first time I hit it, the velocity was almost 10. Let me hit it and let it be kind of soft. Okay, I hit it, and it's a lot a more gentle hit, but it sounded the same, no matter whether I tap it or smash into it. Well, of course, that's happening because this start function will only play the sound. I haven't done anything with retrieving a parameter value, or using velocity value to set the parameter. So that I need to do using this part of the cheat sheet, where we modulate the event using a parameter. And all I need to do is just simply grab this bit of code, copy, paste it, and I like to put that right before So it can apply what's needed to the sound in terms of parameters, and then all of that is in place before we actually play it. So barrier hit is the thing that we want to control. Parameter value, well, we know we have this thing called vehicle velocity. That's how fast it's going, and that's what we want to use to set our parameter. So I'm going to paste that in there. But then it also needs a parameter name. And, you know, in your own files, you may remember this. But if you forget or you're not sure, you can always come back here. And the event, when it's selected, will have its parameters listed down here. I named the parameter impact. So that means that I need to call this impact. And note that the name of the parameter is a string. So make sure that you keep those quotation marks in place when you assign that. But once that's done, I can come back here to Unity, let everything compile, and let's hit this. Oh, there we go. I guess I didn't hit it the first time. That was a little bizarre. Hit it pretty hard the last time. There we do. Get a couple different variations. Fantastic. That is exactly what we needed. That first mishit is probably just due to the collider not being exactly where it needs to be here. So that's a good thing to note and fix later on. But for now, we'll just keep moving on and do everything that we need to do and get the rest of these sounds integrated. All right, so at this point, we have our barrier, and we've got crates, but then we also have these barrel things that don't have any sound yet whatsoever. So let's do something about that. We've seen a couple different ways to add sounds. With the crates, we created an instance and have it played when the collision happens. With the barrier, we played a one-shot sound. So let's do something different with these barrels. One of the easiest ways to integrate sounds with FMOD is to have that sound be attached to an emitter object. So let's go ahead and click there in the inspector, add an FMOD Studio event emitter, and we can find our barrel sound right here and just drag that and drop that over there. And so now we've got this barrel. It's right there. That's fantastic. Notice that we have something to play and stop the event right there. And that could be set up. I do that in some of the earlier lessons, but in this example, I want to do it a little bit differently just because I've got something here in the cheat sheet that expands on some of those earlier lessons. You know, in the earlier lessons, we put the studio event emitter in there, and then we can define what play events and stop events are going to cue the sound. Lots of different trigger and collision related things that could happen in Unity to make a sound begin or stop its playback. But it's also possible to play the emitter sound using C# code. And I think that's a valuable thing to add here because I haven't done that in any of the earlier lessons. So we'll just kind of walk through the process here. You can see that like other FMOD events, this needs a declaration first. So I'm going to copy this and go back to my code and paste it in. Declaration, we've got one right there for the barrel, so let's just go ahead and put this one after it. And I'm sorry, I've got one for the barrier, so let's keep our naming consistent. Whoops. Okay, call this barrel hit. And that allows us to have things in place. Oh my gosh. No, I'm thinking about this in completely the wrong way. Well, not completely the wrong way, but not entirely the wrong way. This script is in, this is player controller. And in order for this to work, the script needs to be on this game object itself. I've just got my methods mixed up here. Sorry. Yeah, so we've got our event emitter here, but now we need to do our scripting in something new. So let's create a new script, and let's call this script, maybe we'll call it win barrel hit. So that way it's abundantly clear what this is going to be. And there we go. So now we have our win barrel hit script in there. And now that we've got that, we will edit this. So choose edit script, and here we are. Fantastic. Now that I've got my head screwed on straight with all of this stuff, declaration. As I was saying earlier, there we go. We need to put our declaration there, but it's going to go on this script, which is attached to the game object, same game object as the emitter itself. Now, once that's attached, we need to retrieve that emitter component. Basically, just make sure that these two things are hooked up. So I'm going to go ahead and grab all of this stuff, although I don't know, do I need all that stuff? Yeah, I don't have an awake function in there, so let's just go ahead and grab all of that and then paste it in. Got my awake function, and I didn't change any of these names, which isn't a huge issue, but given the fact that I'm copying and pasting this stuff, let's just gonna go ahead and change this to barrel event emitter. And then we'll make sure that we've got names that aren't coming from our cheat sheet, and something that's going to be unique if I would decide to do this later on in the game. But now we've got this barrel event emitter, and that gets us started. Now, we need to make sure that this plays back. So, back to our cheat sheet, we play the sound, and here, this is actually really helpful because this is going to allow us to just drop this right into a script. We're not using start. We're not using update here. We'll use start later, but let me just go ahead and put this in there. And we are looking for a collision. When the barrel is hit, it's going to collide with the main vehicle. Vehicle is here, and it's tagged with the player tag. So then that's what we can use here. And we'll make sure that our barrel event emitter is the one that plays. So this should be all good to go. Let's check it out. There we go. So again, this isn't one of those things that is better best necessarily. It's really just a different way of doing things, but one that I didn't go over in any of the previous 7 lessons. So helpful here as another way to integrate a sound that's tied to a collision event with an object in your game world. All right, we have one last thing to integrate. If we look at our list of sounds right here, we put in our barrier, we put in our crate, we put in our barrel, but we haven't done anything with music yet. So that's our final step for this lesson. And putting in music is similar to what we did with our guardrail, where our music is set up as an FMOD event, and we're going to play it in the same way. We'll declare the instance, we'll create the instance, we'll start it, and then, as you'll see a little later, this music has some parameters, and so we want that to respond to changes in the game, and we'll set that up. But for starters, let's go ahead and just take care of these basics. Copy our declaration, and then put this in our player controller script, and this is going to go with all the other declarations here. Game music is the default. I'm not feeling, I don't know, that's a helpful name, but I want to change things up, so let's just call it music. So now we've got a declaration for music. And our cheat sheet tells us that we need to create that instance. That's going to happen here inside the start function. So we'll copy that, scroll down here to our start function, paste that in. If I type music, we get that autocomplete, links it up with the instance that we created earlier. And then what do we want specifically here? Well, select the event, game music main. We've got a full path. Click the button to copy that, and then, as we've done in the past, paste right in here inside the quotation marks so that it remains a string, and we've got a full path for this instance that we've called music. Now that we've done that, we just need to play it. And what does the cheat sheet say? Well, simple. Just use that start method right there. So gamemusic.start, easy to copy. And let's go ahead and put this here in our start function as well. Change that name so that everything agrees. It's happy now. You can see lines up with those other instances, so everything's connected. And this should allow our music to start playing as soon as we run the game. Let's try it out and see and hear what happens. Excellent. Well, that's good. Our music plays, sound effects are still working, but music isn't making any changes or doing anything. So let's take a closer look and listen at the music and understand better what's going on here. So first of all, music selected here in FMOD Events tab. We can play it, stop it, and there are 2 parameters tied to this. The first one is obstacles, the second one is started. And started is really a good place to look, because if we slide this, you'll see that it's either 1 or 0. It's true or false. It's basically a Boolean. And this is something that I set up so that you would get... Whoops, that wasn't supposed to play. It's kind of jumping the gun. Starts playing and it sounds like this, and then as soon as the player initiates the game, it's supposed to play this little melody over the top. And we want to make sure that started switches from 0 to 1 as soon as the player starts driving the vehicle. So we can do that. We just need to find where in our code that happens. So let's look down through here. Here's a section called Player Interactions. It looks to see if we've started or not. And there we can see we actually have a started variable that is also true or false. And we can see, all right, well, if the player is moving forward, we are driving, or the player is driving, started is true. So this looks like a good place to put our code. What code? Back to our cheat sheet, find the line for controlling an event with a parameter. Copy, paste, get that in, and change things up. We know that music is the name of our instance. We know that we want to set the parameter by name. What is the parameter name? Check back here in Unity. The parameter is started. So we can change that. Oh, and I better double check. Started, yes, with a capital S. I'm fairly sure these things are case sensitive, and a lowercase s would make this a little bit grumpy. And we also know from checking that earlier that the value of started is either 0 or 1. 0 if nothing has happened, 1 if we're driving. And so we want to change this parameter value named started to 1 as soon as the player starts driving and moving forward. So we start the game, hear the music, 3, 2, 1, forward, and we get that little change of melody as soon as I press the arrow key and move the vehicle forward. That's great. That's working well. Now, what about these other parameters? Well, as I mistakenly said there, it's called obstacles. There we go with started. And then as we collect obstacles, in this case, smash into crates in this world, they start to accrue. And every time we hit a new crate, we just add a new instrument to the overall mix in our music. And that's how the obstacles parameter is working. So we know that this is the code that we need. It's already copied. I've got it loaded on the clipboard right now, I'm fairly sure. So I can move back here into my C# code and then look to see where is this game tracking things that I've hit. And yeah, it's right here. When this player controller script is attached to the vehicle, when it hits something called crate, there's our play one shot, and it's going to make the sound effect happen at the right moment, make it disappear, and count ++. So we're actually incrementing how many crates we've smashed into. Well, clearly this is the place to put our code. So let's make sure that we're talking to the right object. Music is what we want. Parameter name, I'm fairly sure it's called obstacles. Double check. Yeah, obstacles with a capital O. And then our parameter value is just simply count. So as count, which, scroll it back here to the top, here it is, count, right here, initialized as 0, but then as soon as we start to smash into variables, count will be incremented 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And that value, after it's been incremented, just goes straight into here and allows this parameter to change and will allow our music to shift and develop as well. So let's hear that. I'm gonna drive around these things and give it some time. Hit the second crate and we get that berimbau riff. Third crate, rhythmic synthesizer. what happens here with the next crate. Synthesizer melody. We hit the last crate, and that just brings everything to a close. And then the event has a little bit of a reprise, and some of those rhythmic elements come back, some of the melodic elements are back. And the music that you hear right now is the same that was done for lesson number 7. So if you're curious to see how all of that is set up in FMOD, you can see it in lesson 7. But that does it for us in this lesson. You should be able to see C# has everything that we need. All of that code points to game objects and elements here in Unity. And probably most importantly, it all comes from this cheat sheet. So please use it. I made it so that everybody who wants to make games with Unity and FMOD will have a good resource that they can draw from to help move their process along more quickly and demystify some of the things that are involved when trying to connect middleware like FMOD with a game that you've developed or designed in Unity. I hope it serves you well. Thanks so much.